Hello and welcome to the Scientology Money Project here on SPTV. And got an interesting show today. We're going to go through some background on Scientology. And this show is about the conspiracy theory that L. Ron Hubbard was kidnapped, murdered, killed, that is, by the CIA because he had secrets the CIA wanted. And this is for new Scientology watchers. This is some Scientology history that's really interesting, I find. And we have unstable datum. And he's been commenting since I promoted the show. So I'm going to go take you through some interesting history. It has to do with Scientology's metaphysics. It has to do with conspiracy theory for sure. So I wanted to welcome Denise. Hi, all. Hello, Denise. Hello, Sweet Liberty. And this is something. There's been a line going out that there's for a long time that there's a controlled opposition out here among Scientology critics, anti-Scientology critics, that you're not allowed to talk about the fact that L. Ron Hubbard was a CIA agent, which is simply not true. Make all the websites you want. The thing I hasten to point out, and there's also a line out here that there's a controlled opposition, controlling the message. But what I always tell people is like, look, Scientology can't control the internet. What makes you think anybody control the internet or a message? Nobody can control there's no controlled opposition. There's no penalty for you talking about L. Ron Hubbard being a CIA agent his entire life, as do the McClarys. And conversely, you have Ashton Gray, not his real name, saying that L. Ron Hubbard was captured and killed by the CIA in 1972 and replaced with a body double. Hi, Monkey Paws. Good to have you here. Adam Carmona, welcome. Greeting, fellow walkers of the hedge maze. Yeah, we're all. This is the show where the exiles go. This has to do this is going to be crazy town. It is interesting, and please, if you're watching, live chat and or add something in the comments on YouTube. So anyway, so the idea of controlled opposition. Look, if Scientology can't control the internet, anyone like me or Aaron or Tony or Leah, nobody's Mike, nobody's going to control the messaging about them. I mean, there's a big movement, it's got a lot of different points of view, and Massimo Introvigny of Cheshire, he's not going to control it. So freedom of speech prevails. And sometimes freedom of speech can, I have an opinion. I have a right to my opinion. And if you disagree, I had these two people go batshit crazy simply because I said L. Ron Hubbard didn't have enough assets, in my opinion, to be of any use to the CIA, and they went fucking nuts. So, yeah, but then I didn't do anything to them. It's like, have your opinion, So part of it is just, I want to go into, let's jump right into it, shall we? And looking for some of my regulars to come in. It's a Friday night here in LA, 6:34. So they can, anyway, let's jump in. Okay. Exteriorization. What is it? What does it mean? Exteriorization is the holy grail of Scientology. If you want to know what it's all about, what Scientology all comes down to is exteriorization. So what is exteriorization? Well, Hubbard spent a lot of time talking about how the human body is a trap, how these bodies trap us, how the implanters, these nefarious implanters and psychs and other people are interested in cramming us into our body lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And so he said the ability to go exterior, that is to leave your body at will with full perceptions. And I don't know how you would leave your body at will with full perceptions. For example, could you taste? Could you taste? Could you taste an apple if you were exterior? But anyway, L. Ron Hubbard said that um, Scientology's techniques would allow you to go exterior. And by the way, I remind you that we here at the Cult Investigative Agency, the other CIA, we have the key fob to eternity, and Scientology doesn't. We have the key fob to eternity. L. Ron Hubbard thought he did, but all they wound up having is the front porch to eternity. So, hey, good to see you, OBG Foster. Great to see you. And unstable datum. Now, you're going to have to, I'm giving you a word here, unstable datum. You're going to have to rein yourself in. I know this is exciting to you, but so yeah. Well, I mean, people have had out of body experiences. Hubbard just said that in Scientology, he could make you causatively able to leave the body at will, and you'd have full perceptions and still be in control of your body. I guess it would be like having a drone. Like if your body was the drone, you threw it up and you were controlling it. I, I, I mean, drones didn't exist in Hubbard's time, so I'm maybe updating him. Oh, no need to apologize. I was just saying to curb your enthusiasm. By the way, unstable datum's name is to. No, we're good. Unstable datum. In Scientology, there's a term called a stable datum, and that's sort of like some piece of knowledge that grounds you. That's your stability. It's your stable datum. And so he's using unstable datum, which is clever. No, I wasn't meaning to be impolite, and I apologize. Likewise, if I said I just said like I know this is something. And if unstable datum, if you ever want to do a podcast with me, just email me. We could talk all kinds of stuff. I think LRH left his body while he was in it. Crazy. Yes. Hi, Bev Turner from Edmonton, Canada. Um, the polar regions. It's not. Uh, did he leave his body when he had that post anesthesia psychotic episode? He claimed to have L. Ron Hubbard claimed to have an epiphany while under dental gas in 1938, in which he saw the whole thing. But let's get back into exteriorization, because in conventional spirituality, even esoteric spirituality, it's always viewed that the human is a spirit in a body, and sometimes you have a soul, which is like mediating between the spirit and the body. There's some mediation going on. That's soul, spirit, body. That's that model. The other model is spirit matter. I talk about that in my self-published book, What Causes the Big Bang. Spirit matter, I compounded as one word. And if you think about it, in my view, all of religion is made out of spirit matter. The idea that there's spirit and there's matter, and everything becomes a variation on that. Uh, Spirit or consciousness being in physical matter. So that's a very familiar ancient model. But Hubbard said the Earth was a prison planet, and he said we were trapped in bodies. He said in an interview that man was forced. By that he meant humanity. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing my pink jacket today. Someone mentioned because I want to be SP Ken, and loved the movie Barbie, and I didn't have time to go out and get a pink cowboy hat, and maybe uh, they could send me one. But I'm just showing this to be SP Ken, because we don't have an SP Ken. Um, so so this idea of bodily mechanics of reincarnation, or I'm sorry, incarnation. If you look at the Christian view, Christ incarnated into flesh, and that's the divine incarnating into human form, and yet possessing all the attributes of God. And then you look at other schools of thought that the body's not real, and spirit is primary. So Hubbard was involved in this, and he was fundamentally a Gnostic in the sense that he said that man was pulled down into the physical, into the fleshly realms and overtaken. He couldn't confront it. And Hubbard had all these things about being trapped in the body, and he called it the meat body. He would denigrate it like that. And he was talking about the electronics, and the body could be implanted, and it had engrams, and it had a reactive mind, it had BT. So anyway, the entire holy grail in Scientology is to be able to go exterior from your body at will, to go exterior at will. And that even means when you want to end cycle, that means to die. Um, Hi, folks. Just noticed live it started running 1.25 to catch up. Okay. Don't lose your breath. I don't talk about it. Did you catch up? Okay. No, I was just talking 1 times faster. Glad to have you, Wayne. So now this was L. Ron Hubbard. Now he was on his flagship Apollo. And so we want to establish kind of the setting for what I'm going to talk about. Scientology, and I'll show you, only had this data clear through 67. And then Hubbard wrote the OT levels late 66, early 1967. Then he went on to the Apollo, which of course was, as we reviewed in a prior episode, the Apollo was destroyed after Scientology went ashore in Clearwater. So in 1975, they sold the Apollo. And of course, we went through the show where the Apollo was sold to a party called Zanzibar Shipping. And while it was parked at a dock in Brownsville, Texas, it was hit by by 7 cars that jumped the track from a freight locomotive that was barreling through the yard. And these cars jumped the track and demolished the freeway. They ran into the Apollo, which is now called the Arctic Star, and destroyed it. So it's an interesting aside. Now, this is one of Hubbard's things from his technical dictionary, a retractor beam. And that he says it's a loop or a beam which goes out here from source, hits the target, and drags the target in. It's to grab hold of something and hold it and pull it in. That's one of its uses, and the other use is to nail you into a body, to nail you into a body. So Hubbard saw that there were all these forces like retractor beams or implants, amnesia on the whole track, all kinds of things that would drive you into your body and stick you into your body. And the idea, Sting, whose music I love, Sting made an album called The Soul Cages, at least in the 1980s. And that he got from South American, the idea that the body is a soul cage. They were here only a short time, but it is somewhat of a cage. And so in the transcendental work, it is to overcome the limitations of the body. And there's, in ancient times, the Catholics practiced austerities, as did the Buddhists, austerities, fasting, focus of attention to attain various states to overcome the appetites of the bodies, the temptations of the flesh, as it were. So Hubbard's coming out of that tradition, but he's actually saying once he hits the OT levels, he has a technology to exteriorize. And hi, Christy Z. I totally understand what you're describing. Thanks. I think most people will. Most people will. And people who are atheists, that's fine. That's a natural outcome of evolution, as is belief. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm just talking about what Hubbard's doing. But I'm consider myself a very spiritual person, esoteric. And at some point, I'm going to depart this, and I'm going to start covering my own esoteric work on a different channel I'm creating, which will be called Psychic Architecture. And I want to cover some of my own work. I want to start branching out. Accident? What do you mean by that? Okay. Was the Apollo stored on land when it was hit? No, it was in a it was docked in Brownsville, is docked in the cheapest place they could find in a port. And At night, late at night, this uh, locomotive was barreling through the just going way too fast, and 7 of its cars, the engine didn't derail, but the cars, the freight cars, 7 of them jumped the tracks, slammed into the Apollo with such force. It was like it was a lot of weight, such force that the Apollo was moored that it flexed and it broke the hull, basically twisted the hull. So it smashed into the ship. The ship took on water. It broke the 9-inch polypropylene line. But because the ship was moored, it had to flex, so the bow went one way and the stern went the other, and so it was in the water. They had to stabilize it. They had to remove all the metal from the top, all the superstructure and all the fuel oil, and they had to remove everything to make it because they thought it would sink. They didn't even know if they could tow it the short distance to the wrecking yard. Um, yeah, this is exactly Sting, when he was with the police. We are spirits in the material world. So that's a traditional understanding. Hubbard does different things with this understanding as Scientology, and he's he does different things with it. The first thing he does is he changes the word spirit and calls it Thetan, and that's because he said that the word spirit was just too overloaded from millennia past with different meanings, and he wanted Scientology to have its own distinctive view of spirit. So he called it the Thetan. And it's a Gnostic conception that we were pulled down. And he differs. If you look at Hubbard, when someone asks me what Scientology is, it, I always tell them it depends what period of time you're talking about, because Scientology is a moving target. What Hubbard was talking about in 1953 is certainly not what David Miscavige is doing now. Whole different Scientology. So that's why I say that, and I'll go through it, that there was a Gen 1 Scientology, and that was really Volney Matheson's equipment, as we'll get to. I know a writer who wrote a series of novels based on spies going exterior. We may get to this. So it's a cult. Uh, well, yes and no, Bev. A cult just means secret knowledge. So the idea of spirit and matter, and the idea of the spirit engaging in what would be called astral projection. That's an old notion of it, astral projection, out of body experiences. People have all kinds of experiences. Hubbard simply said that his technology would allow you to do it in a reliably stable manner. And it seems likely that LRH left his mind somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, and it's too bad he didn't have an air tag on it or a tracking device. You should probably put a tracking device or an Apple AirTag on your mind in case you lose it, and then you just use your cell phone. Find my mind. I mean, I can find my cell phone. I have a tracking, and I find my device from my desktop or another device. So it would logically follow that if I could put that, a la Elon Musk, if I could put an AirTag into my mind, if I were to lose my mind, I would just have myself or my designated agent locate it through an AirTag. I think that might work. I'm going to sell that idea to Elon Musk next time I see him. Because according to some of my detractors, I'm Illuminati because I've had security clearances. So when I see Elon Musk next, I was mentioning the idea to him that let's AirTag the mind, because he's already doing Neuralink. So So you've got unstable data, and I got a confusion in the chat. Well, I like having a vast array, a vast audience. I really like having it, and that's why we go long form. Some people call and say, "Hey, Jeff, you should cut it down a half hour." It's like my audience, they like long form, and you can always watch the replay, go in and out. Some people go to bed. Shazbat, cool name. Yay, I caught alive. Hi from the Shetland. Wow, the Shetland Islands. Great to have you here. Wow. I was working at Hughes Aircraft during the Shetland Islands when, you know, uh, General Galtieri, and Argentina wanted the Shetland Islands back. And Margaret Thatcher ordered one of the British submarines to sink the General Belgrano. And we were getting actual live updates before the public through the people in the company who were working at Hughes, within Hughes. This is theta is a fascinating letter to put in. Yeah, it is for meaning though. True. Rough out of body experience. Yes. And seems like drugs would allow you to do it in a reliable manner. Well, some people do. Uh, there is drug mysticism to be sure. And that was certainly explored when LSD came out with Timothy Leary. But before that, going back for millennia, there was ayahuasca, peyote, mescaline. So drug mysticism was another way uh, to go out of the body, as it was viewed. And look, I'm just going to tell people who are materialistic uh, that I'm having a conversation. So yes, it could all be brain based. I'm just talking about metaphysics and esoterica. If you want to have a brain based model, fine. Um, you know, because we're not doing science here. This is a podcast. We're not doing science. And remember, because we have the key fob to eternity here, we can talk about this. And so it is very interesting to talk about. They wanted the Shetlands too. Oh, you know what? I know I got confused. I'm sorry. The Falkland Islands, not the Shetlands. Thank you, Adam. Sometimes I just, my mind is so vast. Yeah, that's a better way than saying I'm having a senior moment. Um, Ironically, vast is where it's at. These briefings are my confusion formula. Well, good. I mean, I'm doing a doubt formula where I doubt that I'll have $1 billion by the end of my life, but I could just manifest it. Okay, so let's get back. So Hubbard's very concerned with the mechanics of incarnation and why we're trapped. And oh, by the way, this was a funny thing. While digging through, I just want to throw this in. It's kind of hard to read, but basically, Hubbard declared people fair game for stealing OT materials that were not meant to be distributed um, at the behest of psychiatrists. And he had already canceled fair game, and I believe this was written after. So I'm going to research this. I just threw that in there. Um, Now, Hubbard believed, of course, that in order to learn how to exteriorize and go free from your body and use the OT technology, you had to paradoxically, even though this was about spiritual liberation from the body, transcendentalism from the messed universe. Uh, what puts the lie to that is you still had to give Scientology all your money and sign contracts to go into arbitration and give away your civil and legal rights. So that's the usual paradox. One thing when you're looking at charlatans and con men, uh, L. Ron Hubbard's talking about spiritual freedom, but let's look at it operationally in the messed universe, as he called it, messed matter, energy, space, time. He just means the physical universe. It's a language substitute. Like this is a messed object. It's refreshing too, as is my pink jacket. I think it's stylish. And Esoterica would be a great name for a band, but nobody would get the lyrics. Yeah. So, did he get the tractor beam from Star Trek, or did they both get it from someone else? They both got it from someone else because the idea of a tractor beam goes way back. Dreamer Wars. Wow, I like that. Welcome, Dreamer Wars. Your mind is so vast that some information and facts get lost in there and can't be found as quickly and easily as a person with a normal mind. Thank you for saying that, because that's what I feel like sometimes. I appreciate you saying that. Here, I'll tell you a true story. When I was in high school, okay, they were doing IQ tests. This was in the 70s, these aptitude tests, as when we were like seniors in high school, because they wanted like our career counselor. Because when I went to high school, not a lot of people went to college. I think only 25% or less. And so I did this test along with everyone else. And it was administered in health class, where we learned sex education. But it really wasn't. So anyway, I scored like extremely high on the abstract thinking part of it, and apparently I scored high so that it caused concern, and they made me take it over. And so I scored high in abstract. Now, if you ask me to get into algebra, don't. So I don't know how my mind works, but thank you for that. I'm glad we have people who can appreciate that when you know how it is when your mind goes faster than you can talk. And so, anyway, thanks for that. Now, so Hubbard, Hubbard, for all his talk about the mess universe and breaking free the body, he wanted your body in the Scientology course room or on session holding the cans, and he wanted you to sign the contracts, and he wanted your money. So that's the number one contradiction. And this is something Anonymous made a good point out of, is religion should be free. I mean, you got to cover your expenses. And that's why I think the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, do a good job of only asking for 10%, as do Christian churches, Hebrew scriptures. I mean, 10%, that's fair because you got to pay the expenses where you're meeting. But Hubbard wanted everything. So for all this talk about going exterior, you had to be there in the body, in present time, with your credit card, checkbook, children's college education fund, any other way, insurance policies, anything he could get you to sell, give away, because Hubbard said that Scientology processing is more valuable than anything else, than homes, cars, education. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out, that, yeah, that's the contracts and the metaphysics don't go together. Because if you're really about transcendentalism, enlightenment and liberation, you're not going to strip people of their civil rights. You're going to empower them. And if they pay you, that's fine, because teachers should get paid. They're working, they're doing some work, but not everything, including your family, your sanity, your freedom, your kids. I mean, it's just so that's just one thing I want to put in there. Labyrinths are only puzzles to the visitor and not the occupants. True. That's absolutely true. I'm very comfortable in the labyrinth of my own mind, and I enjoy the luxury of my own thoughts. So I'm sure those in my audience do as well. I have ADHD. My mind is in three places, and that's where you learn to function. You know, um, if you have exteriorized, would that mean a zombie signed the contract? Now, this is a really goddamn interesting point. This is really interesting because Hubbard said, and we're going to get into it. I'm going to jump around, so just hang on and follow. Hubbard talked about bodies in pawn, where somebody could be controlling you. He talked about how your body thetans can be controlling you, because your body thetans, and I've written, they're like psychoactive entities live streaming into your consciousness, into your identity. That part of you consider yourself to be I, or Hubbard would call it thetan. So if you had these psychoactive entities live streaming into you, and you're a thetan, who's really signing the contract? And if you've gone exterior, to OBG Foster's excellent point, if you've gone exterior from your body, then is the genetic entity, as Hubbard called it, is the genetic entity signing the contract. So if you default or get in trouble or want to sue the church, is it the genetic entity? So Hubbard had this complicated matrix. There's the genetic entity, which is like a robot circuit type of thing that runs the body mechanically. And he a lot of times when people died, they said, "Oh, the Thetan left the body a long time earlier." But we've got to get into. Oh, we're already half hour. I haven't even gotten to the good stuff. Let's get into the good stuff. Um, okay, so Hubbard said, when I was case supervising the L's, he's meaning on the Apollo, I would never let a pre-OT leave the ship unless he'd gone exterior with full perceptions and was able to maintain it. So this is Hubbard's baseline promise that he gives to all Scientologists, and this is the holy grail of Scientology, that you're able to leave, go exterior with full perceptions. That means leave the body and control the body remotely. That's what he wants. Now, my lovely wife, Karen, who was one of only 7 Class 12 auditors made by L. Ron Hubbard on the ship Apollo. She worked with him personally. Her auditing room was right behind L. Ron Hubbard's research room, and she piloted stuff with the other Class 12s. She never saw this happen. She's written that. But L. Ron Hubbard claimed he would never let anyone leave the ship unless they'd gone exterior. Well, that's a self-attestation, but you'd say, yeah, I went clear, probably just to get the hell off the ship. But some people in Scientology have claimed it. And I'm going to share a screen with you because I wanted to know more about this. I wanted to get more information. I was curious. So I went to the Scientology website because I was curious. So at the Scientology website, and I've got to drag one screen over to my other monitor. That's what I'm doing. Okay. Can one go exterior in auditing? We asked the Church of Scientology, or actually it poses this question. It's an ask and answer question on its own website. Let me make this bigger for your reading. Okay. So we're at the Scientology website, and I am using a VPN. Can one go exterior in auditing? And the church answers, exteriorization is the state of the Thetan, the individual himself being outside the body with or without full perception, but still able to control and handle the body. Exteriorization is a personal matter for each individual. Many Scientologists have been known to go exterior, so it would not be at all surprising if one, too, goes exterior at some point during one's auditing. When a person goes exterior, they achieve a certainty that they are themselves a spiritual being and not their body. So let's break this down. And Mary, jump in because you're good at parsing sentences. Everyone else too. Okay, so exteriorization is the state of the Thetan, the individual himself, being outside the body with or without full perception. Got it. But still able to control the body. I have a problem with that because if you can leave the body with or without full perception, dude, you're not going to be able to control the body if you don't have full perception. So, for example, if you leave the body and you don't have the perceptic of vision, sight, being able to see, you're going to walk out under traffic and do a sudden exteriorization when that truck hits you. I mean, if you can't hear, so this is a flawed sentence. You have to have all the senses of human nature. You have to have, seeing, feeling, heat. I mean, if you don't have your sense of feeling, you could put your hand on the frying pan. So this is like flawed fundamentally the way they pose it here. You have to have full perception to be able to control the body and handle the body. Look, what if you were outside the body and you got on a motorcycle, you got on your Harley, and to cruise down to Tombstone, Arizona, and where I hang out sometimes. If you don't have balance, you're not going to be able to control the body. You can't ride a unicycle exterior, is my argument, or a motorcycle. So that's okay. Now the church always likes to take your money but shift all the responsibility to you. That's why you attest. They take the money, but they say the results are up to you. We promise nothing. Exteriorization is a personal matter for each individual. I don't know what that sentence even means. It's a person. No, all Scientologists want exteriorization. In fact, L. Ron Hubbard said, you can't leave the ship unless you're exterior with full perception. So it's not a personal matter. Ron, make up your mind. It's not a personal matter. if you don't let people leave the ship unless they've gone exterior with full perceptions and are stable in it. Many Scientologists have been known to go exterior. Many, how many? 2, 1, none, 5,000? How many? We don't know. They have been known to go exterior. Why? Because they said. How does this work? So it would. So the church continues. It would not be at all surprising if 1, 2 goes exterior at some point during one's auditing. When? How? Like it would not be surprising. Oh, you went exterior? Well, that's not surprising. When a person goes exterior, they achieve a certainty that they are themselves a spiritual being and not their body. And that's kind of Scientology's argument, that if you go exterior, it's proof positive that you're a Thetan and you're not your body. And I've talked to people who are in Scientology, more than a few, who like were doing some course and they were suddenly floating on the ceiling. Okay. And look, that's fine by me. That's, so oh look, you can request a DVD, which I don't want to. Oh, look at this. Why does one have to wait 6 weeks to participate in auditing if one has been habitually using drugs? That's a really interesting question. We'll get into that. I think they want you to make sure you're not going to get arrested and drag the organ to it. I don't know, or maybe you got to clean up you can't go exterior when you're. I don't know what. That's an interesting question. How many hours a day can one participate in auditing? The question that's missing from this informative thing is, does David Miscavige still beat his staff, and where is Shelley? I just had to throw that out because Osa's listening. So anyway, let's stop sharing this page. So you can see that Scientology is still promoting this. They're saying it's a private matter, but L. Ron Hubbard said, no, you can't leave the ship if you hadn't gone exterior with full perceptions and were able to maintain it. Okay, so Espinal. Oh, I just threw this in for fun. Espinal, Dr. Hubbard informs us that we're part of the Espinal United Stars system. So this is Sun 12. Our sun is Sun 12. And the whole title is Espinal United Stars, Moons, Planets, and Asteroids. And this part of the universe is ours. This quarter of the universe is ours. So we're part of the Espinal Confederacy. I just thought you would like to know that. Espinal United Stars. Okay, so exteriorization. This is from the Technical Dictionary, which is no longer in publication, but it's clear that you're leaving your body. There's even an exteriorization rundown, which has apparently been named the interiorization rundown. So exteriorization, leaving the body, is the whole thing. And now we know, as I went through in the past, and this is important, I just want to add this. In the 1950s, I've been through my previous podcast, I showed the early L. Ron Hubbard Dianetics was Freudian psychotherapy and hypnotic regression to relive a trauma. And this will become important later. There wasn't anything the CIA would want or need in Freudian 1890 era Freudian hypnotic regression, which Freud later dropped hypnosis in favor of free association. And we saw that Volney Matheson, when Hubbard was hypnotizing people and to use Freudian regression techniques on them, Volney Matheson had his e-meter and had his auditing system. And that's why I argued that the true founder of Scientology Generation 1 was Volney Matheson, because L. Ron Hubbard took Volney's e-meter and his system of auditing. And Volney Matheson's the true creator of early Scientology, to which Hubbard added a bunch of stuff. This point's going to become important later, so just keep it in mind. Now, up until from 1950, when Dianetics was released, there was the Dianetics Clear, and all the way up through until the OT levels were introduced in 67, coincident with the Guardian's office and the Sea Org, you could only go to clear. That's all you had. And exteriorization was talked about, but it hadn't been formalized. And part of a rundown called the L's dealt with exteriorization, but exteriorization could occur at any time. So Hubbard expanded the grade chart, and he went up into the OT levels. And this is where our theory, what we're going to talk about, kicks in. By the way, I had this chart. I wanted to just add this relative to e-metering. Peripheral psychophysiology. Meters, galvanic skin resistance or electrodermal response is still used in parts of medicine and behavioral science to measure things, biofeedback, for example. So the e-meter only measures one channel of the human sensory, of the human nervous system. So you have and I mapped it in red, the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, and the skin sweat glands. So you can see how little of Scientology, how little of human consciousness, of the human body, Scientology is really mapping. They're only getting the skin and sweat glands, the electrodermal response. They're missing everything else. The reason I make the point about the e-meter measuring electrodermal response is if you did not have a body, you couldn't hold the cans to get audited. So the contradiction, again, is if you're working to be free of the body, you still need the body to hold the e-meter cans after you paid the money and signed the contracts to get free of the body. So that meter, if it's the interface between you going exterior, it's kind of one of those things like if you need a body to hold the can so you can go exterior from the body, then you need the body. You follow? It's like you can't escape the necessity of the body when you're in Scientology, even though that's what you're trying to seek liberation from, because holding the cans, that's messed universe stuff. Meter, cans, the auditor, it's all messed universe. And yet you're using all messed universe to try to escape the messed body. There's a circular logic there. Think about it. So what happens is, okay, there's Captain Bill Robertson entered the scene. He was an early Sea Org member who split from the church and started his own offshoot called the Free Zone. And that's where this is where we start getting into it. Okay. Captain Bill Robertson had some things to say. And one of the things that comes out of what I'm going to present to you is the idea that the OT levels were so powerful because they would allow you to exteriorize. Therefore, Scientology OTs could exteriorize en masse and defeat the forces of global darkness and enslavement. I will repeat. There became a belief, principally in the free zone, that the OT levels L. Ron Hubbard created, discovered, and propounded to the human race were so powerful that the Scientology OTs could leave their bodies and go out and do psychic spying and spy on the forces of darkness in Interpol, SMERSH, Big Pharma, psychiatry, everywhere. And by leaving the body and performing espionage on a covert, exteriorized basis, they could take down the forces of evil that had a vested interest in keeping this world at war, drugged, hypnotized, and so on. So there was a view that came about that L. Ron Hubbard, and I'm using an image here, was kidnapped and murdered and replaced by a body double. That has been very much in currency in free zone circles, and it's been talked about in critic circles. So this is what I wanted to talk about. this thing. So, as this, what happened is in 1972, L. Ron Hubbard needed to come back to the U.S. He had been on the Apollo since 67, 66, 67, and he needed to come back to the U.S. for a lot of reasons. So Jim Kelsey came with him, and I knew Jim. Uh, Karen introduced me to him. I talked to Jim many, many times, and Jim talked publicly about it. Hubbard also had a bodyguard named Paul Preston. So they flew over from the Mediterranean and they flew into New York. Hubbard actually got stopped at customs. He had a lot of currency on him, and Jim and Karen and I were at dinner, and Jim was explaining how Hubbard freaked out. He was wanting to enter Fabian, but he got pulled aside by customs because he was carrying a lot of currency, a lot of cash, and they wanted to know where he got the cash. It's not illegal to carry cash, but customs just wanted to talk to the dude. And Hubbard, they let Hubbard go because you can carry cash as long as you have provenance. I mean, I could carry $100,000 through the airport, and if I have my provenance that it's legit, clean money, I can carry the money. Not against the law to carry $1 million in cash. Just make sure you can tell them that here's where it came from. It's clean. It's not the proceeds of crime. It came from my work in the Cult Investigation Agency. The Sykes paid me to investigate cults. I mean, it's clean, right? So, anyway, I want to show you some wild things. Okay, there's a couple books, and I'm doing this to prove my point that I'm not out to that you can talk about the CIA and Hubbard being an agent or being kidnapped. It's all free to talk about. Free flow of information. There's no controlled opposition. So that's part of what I'm doing here is to just tell my detractors, look, talk about whatever you want. If you don't get an audience, though, that's not my fault. If the public doesn't find your work interesting, you're not going to sell anything. Okay. I listen to Coldplay because they're a great band. Still a Parachutes. It's like phenomenal band. I listen to Beth Orton. I buy what I like in music, cars, watches, well, whatever, right? So if you don't have something, if you're like if the public doesn't get it, they're not going to buy it. So the lack of interest is not a controlled opposition. It's more like kind of like, yeah, not that interested. So let's just go to let's start sharing some screens, and anyone's free to you know contact me if you want to talk. So here's one of the books. Okay, now the untold story. This is what's out there. I'm just kind of showing you Free Zone and some of the things that go on out there, and you can make up your own mind about it. I am just showing you what's there. So Andreas Gross and his books out there, and wait a minute. The Occult Sciences, a compendium of transcendental doctrine. Ooh, I need to order that and read it. That I'm sorry, I have to go back. I jumped. We're going to go back to. Oh, okay, yeah, we're going to go back to Andreas's book. The Untold Story Behind the U.S. Government's Takeover of Scientology. Now, this is one of the conspiracy theories that David Miscavige is actually CIA or U.S. government. So this theory is that Mead Emery, who used to work for the IRS, Mead Emery, who used to work for the IRS, was called in and helped to hijack all the tech and the copyright. And since its founding days, Scientology, the church, has been infiltrated by government agents intent on using the new technology for clandestine war operations. So the idea here is that because you could exteriorize and become a psychic spy, the CIA and the government had to go in and steal the real OT levels and substitute a fake L. Ron Hubbard with fake OT levels that wouldn't allow you to exteriorize. So the government got to keep the real shit for itself, and you got a detuned, out of focus Scientology. So they're saying L. Ron Hubbard's technology. The technology, hereinafter referred to, threatened national security and had to be kept out of enemy hands at all costs. And the deep state sees you, the people, as their worst enemy. Okay. So they don't want you to be having the OT levels. This work is the first published book containing hundreds of pages of declassified documents and testimony. You'll see how the government's operation was executed and how the once powerful technology, that means the OT, exteriorization, psychic spy technology, was replaced with a benign feel-good substitute for its parishioners, robbing them of the church's ultimate promise of spiritual freedom. This book contains all the information you need to file a class action lawsuit against the U.S. government for the suppression of religious freedom, putting into your hands the full potential to destroy the deep state for good. That's because if the evidence cited here was ever brought to court, it would compel the deep state to release information about its agents within Scientology, release the original writings of Watergate and Hubbard, return the original confidential spiritual technology. So basically, if we follow this, we can see that the technology was so powerful. It was, in fact, more powerful than the key fob to eternity, that the government stole it, killed L. Ron, and then gave Scientologists a detuned, cheapened version, and then put in a high school dropout named David Miscavige to run the shit show, which was a detuned, out of focus Scientology that had no spiritual horsepower. Good grief, this is so similar to the sovereign citizen government supplanting theory. Yes, Punch Buggy, and it gets even more interesting. But this fellow is saying that you have the basis. This book contains all the information you need to file a class action lawsuit against the U.S. government. Well, one of the problems with that is in the United States, you have to get the government's permission to sue the government. You can't just sue the government. So for people living outside the U.S., and it's true in most countries, in the U.S., you have to get the government's permission to sue the U.S. government. So if they really had the OT levels, they would say, you can't sue us. No, they would just get the case dismissed because the deep state would theoretically control the courts and get your class action to get the truth revealed. They would just dismiss your case. So that's one of the theories there. And the next one I'm going to share. And again, I'm doing this as a public service to show that it's out there, and I'm not okay. Now this one, Ashton Gray. Okay, now this is he made the rounds a few years ago, and okay, now he says this is the Watergate conspiracy, the Watergate hoax. Ashton Gray, that's not his real name, but I'm going to just read this. Okay, part of it. Okay, now, so there was no first break-in at Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate over Memorial Day weekend 1972. There were no electronic bugs planted in DNC headquarters at all that weekend. There were no logs of intercepted conversations because there were no bugs to begin with. Okay, now, hold on. What the world knows as Watergate was an elaborate hoax designed to hide what the CIA was really doing over those 3 days, while Americans were cooking out and celebrating the start of summer. It was 3 days that changed the history of the world, but the official story of a break-in at the Watergate that weekend is the real cover up of something darker, far more malignant than the world has ever seen. Watergate was a hoax. It was a malicious fiction. Ooh, so what went on? Well, thankfully, somebody wrote a glowing review of the book so we can know what goes on. You can buy the book. I mean, okay, now here we have an Edward Kist, who writes, I can't recommend this brilliant work highly enough. One wonders if the author is Robert is Edward Kiss. Okay. Okay. Now get this. Ashton Gray has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Watergate was a hoax perpetrated by the CIA. The entire spectacle was designed to mask what the CIA was really doing at the time, which was taking down L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. I am not a Scientologist. Yeah, you are. But I am a researcher into mind control technology and CIA crimes. You mean Scientology? Okay. Hubbard's work was driven by his understanding that all humans have the inherent but suppressed ability to vastly expand consciousness, and he was developing technologies to assist humanity in realizing this potential. Our government was very interested in using this technology for espionage and other nefarious purposes, but Hubbard steadfastly refused to allow that to happen. So he had to be taken down. And so basically, spoiler alert, they kidnapped and killed Hubbard and put in a body double. And so Watergate, even though it was investigated by the FBI and there were U.S. Senate hearings, I remember I was in high school and I watched the Senate hearings because it happened during summer vacation. Have you seen the document making rounds purporting to be a memory fake? Yeah, there's people who are saying that, like, I don't know if it's RJ60. So one of Ron's tapes, they did a voice analysis and that really wasn't Ron's work, etc. So we're going to go on to another thing. Well, anyway, that's the basic line, is that the OT levels were so powerful. Now, and that's the psychic spying. So, they had to take out Ron and put in a body double. And so L. Ron Hubbard, and where this comes back to circle. So L. Ron Hubbard comes to New York, right? Goes to Queens, New York. He's living in an apartment with Jim Dinkelsey and Paul Preston. And that's where I mentioned, Ron would eat fish sticks and French fries that Jim would cook on a cookie sheet in the oven. But Jim was also giving him vitamins, and Ron was typing. That picture of Ron with the long hair typing, that was taken by Jim. Jim Denny's called, a good friend of Janice Grady's. So Ron wrote program or Operation Snow White when he was in Queens. He put out a hit on Werner Erhard and just, then went back to the ship. So exteriorization, you look at someone like the late Kirstie Alley, don't know. She doesn't seem exterior as a Thetan. Nobody does. I always ask OT8s, show me, has Scientology ever made a spiritual master? No, they've created a manufactured identity, but have they ever made a true spiritual master? That's one of the measures I use. Let me see. Well, Watergate did its part in busting the population with the distrust of government, hence decisive, so potential. Yeah, I was disillusioned because growing up, Mary, boomers will remember when we grew up, the president of the United States had a lot of respect. It'd be like, I don't agree with him, but he's my president. He's our president. And Kennedy was a notorious philanderer, JFK, but the press wouldn't talk about it. They didn't talk about President Roosevelt being in a wheelchair. They would cover up for the presidents, and Nixon really blew apart that trust, as did his secret bombing of Cambodia and Laos, and a lot of things that happened shook the trust in the government. And so what happened? Getting back to this, there were a couple of OTs who left. Hal Puthoff, who was a physicist, and Ingo Swann. And what happened is the Russians were actually doing research into leaving the body and doing psychic espionage. And so the CIA funded a program called Operation Stargate, and Hal Puthoff, who had left the church, and Ingo Swann, who left the church. They were remote viewers. So the CIA did have a remote viewing program. They wanted to see if there really was a psychic potential to leave the body, and it was a designed experiment that the CIA used and conducted. And Hal would apparently, write notes to Ron on the slide. This was conducted at Stanford Research Institute, and it was just sort of permitted. And the movie that George Clooney was in, The Men Who Stare at Goats, is about that program. And I know a little about um, Stanford Research Institute. My mentor, Ray Hartman, worked there. He was one of my mentors in the interaction of what you call photobiology, photopharmaceuticals, uh, about the interaction of pharmaceuticals and light to treat skin disease, cancers. He was doing work with the Wellman Clinic in Boston, and Dr. Rox Anderson, who's one of the top, probably the top dermatologist in the United States. So Ray had worked at SRI and had some background on that. He's the guy that Ray's one of the guys that invented the Cermax light, which was built he designed it with some other people in '68. It was a space station docking light. So it was xenon plasma, sapphire lens, and it would, because you needed a light in space that could operate when spacecraft had to dock. So anyway, that came out of SRI, and then it was commercialized. And now it's used in some pretty exotic applications as well as endoscopy when you go with a fiber optic in the body. So anyway, yeah, there was actually a CIA program called Operation Stargate. You can read all about it. There's plenty of books on it, and I've read them. And the conclusion was that there were some interesting results, but things like the SR-71, electronic signals intelligence gathering, satellites, human intelligence yielded so much better. And then, of course, in the Bush Cheney era, waterboarding would get a lot of intelligence, basically what they called enhanced interrogation. So the program was interesting, but it was defunded because it didn't really yield any big hits. There was some thing Ingo claimed he saw something on Mars that was saw later on in the future, that was seen later on in the future. And then one of the viewers said they saw this massive Russian submarine. And there was a whole protocol they were given targets and things. So I'm not going to go into Operation Stargate, but because that program existed, a lot of people who wanted to believe that Scientology had that powerful technology and they hadn't gone exterior, that is, they weren't powerful spiritual beings. My theory is, and please feel free to disagree with me, because I'm not, go make all the websites you want, go make podcasts. You're free to do anything and everything because nobody's controlling anything, I assure you. So I've read through this, and it's like the idea that Watergate was an elaborate hoax designed entirely to kill L. Ron Hubbard and steal the OT technology. Look, let's take that apart. I'm going to do this as a private investigator. Okay. The OT technology back then would have to exist in written form. So the documents would have to be somewhere. L. Ron Hubbard's safe, or the Guardian's office safe, or they'd have to be on the ship. They would have to be physically located somewhere in course packs. And plenty of people were doing the OT levels, and they were going to the ship or the org, or and so this is what reason think this out as an investigator. Okay, so we're going to destroy a sitting American president by concocting a Watergate hoax. And this is going to be our cover to kill L. Ron Hubbard. And we're going to replace him with a body double and a watered down version of Scientology. Well, first of all, you'd have to actually have a team to find L. Ron Hubbard, who was in Queens, New York. And we know that because he entered, and U.S. Customs has a record of him entering. So did they get Ron in New York? Did he enter, or did they get him in the Mediterranean? Secondly, why do you need Watergate as a cover? You could just, if this is a CIA operation, you just take Ron Hubbard out in the Mediterranean. In fact, you could just board the Apollo, with a SEAL team. And I forget what year the SEALs started, but special forces. You could just board the Apollo, put Ron in a weighted lead bag and throw him over the side, take the materials, pose as Russians. I'm saying you don't need like this whole Watergate. There was actual evidence of the break-in, the burglary. There was John Dean's testimony. I mean, you just go through the list of people who testified, the evidence, the documents, the break-in, Nixon's you don't need Watergate was its own event. So for Ashton Gray, to surmise that was a cover up. And then if you're going to get a substitute technology, you need like some former Scientologist to write a watered down thing. You actually would have to know, you'd actually have to have somebody who knew how the real OT secret psychic spying worked. And they would have to collude with you to go, okay, I know how the real stuff works because we're going to teach it to CIA agents. So you got to have a plant inside the church who knows how to actually do the real OT stuff. So you got to have him working with you. And so you have to steal the materials, get them in the CIA, get people who know how to use them to train CIA psychic spies. And at the same time, you've got to kill Hubbard and put in a body double. I mean, how many redheaded people like? So you got to put in someone who looks like Hubbard, who's going to fool Mary Sue Hubbard, who's going to fool the messengers like Janice and Terry and Dee Dee and all the rest of them. So you're going to fool all the Commodore's messenger organizations. You're going to fool all the CRX staff, all the people who work with Ron, Bill Franks. You're going to fool all these people with a body double. And then you're going to have Ron disappear, which he basically did. But you're going to have Ron come back to America, go to Clearwater, then go out into the California desert in La Quina and start making horrible training films, which Mitch Brisker talks about. You're going to have him make horrible training films and kind of do crazy stuff. And Scientologists are going to be none the wiser. It's like there's just too many moving parts. It's like too many moving parts. Like it's like people who think the moon landing was a hoax. It's like you got to. They really did build the Saturn V, and they built everything. And it's like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, it's easier to actually go to the moon than fake it. It take a lot less work. So it sounds like grassy knoll stuff. Yeah, it is. It's like there's a lot of work to get the OT materials. I mean, if you really wanted to get them, you would just put a hit on Hubbard, steal the materials, and be done with it. You don't need Watergate. That's just like a lot of work. And there was a break-in. There was plenty of evidence. So kind of crazy. The other thing too, I'm going to show, and look, if Ashton Gray wants to come on and talk, you went on Coast to Coast. I'm glad to talk to you. You are talking the scope of walk-in, not just a body double, unless everyone else. You know what's interesting? Mary's talking about a spiritual phenomenon known as a walk-in, and generally a walk-in is and correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, you can work with me. Um, a walk-in is where, let's say you get in a, let's say you're 7 years old and you're in a horrendous car crash and you're going to die. And you, the spirit, say, I don't want to live in this crippled hard body. So you're willing to leave. And that means another spirit who goes, oh, I can handle this. I can heal the body and get better, will walk in and they'll take over the body. And uh, I mean, I've known people who said they walked into the body literally at age 7 or 8, that they were walk-ins. And there's other people who, like, they were possessed. The walk-ins were actually demons who took them over. So I've talked to a wide range of people all the time. And so a walk-in, Mary, in this narrative that the free zoners put forth, L. Ron Hubbard's killed. He's murdered because he's too brilliant and genius, and they have to kill him. So they can't really affect a walk-in. Plus, they don't have the technology of getting a walk-in. And I'm just entertaining the question because it's a little bit, it's interesting to consider within a metaphysical context. Because if you, the government, knew how to actually do a walk-in on Hubbard, then you already know how to do the OT stuff. You follow? If you can, if you have operators in the CIA, spooks, that can do a walk-in, uh, that is a discarnate spirit entering Hubbard's body and taking it over, then you've already got the OT shit down, and you don't need to steal his OT shit to begin with if you can do a walk-in. If you can do that kind of caper, then you already got it. You're already there. You don't need the cravat and the cools and stuff. Um, so so the other problem we have, Ashton, if I may call you Ashton, Ashton, um, is this. Let me get this. So we have. Let me see if I've got. So we have L. Ron Hubbard kidnapped. I like that picture. That could be Ron. But there's a picture of him in 1980, and there's he is in 1980. That was like a picture of him. Now, also, the other problem, Scientology is such a hyper security state with spying, cameras, all the mess. Scientology engages in so much spying and cameras and treachery and PIs that they don't have OT anything. They have to rely on just spying and espionage and all dirty tricks and dirty contracts. There's no OT anything in this. They are just a police state masquerading as a religion. They're an international criminal syndicate. So, oh, here's a free zone decree. I won't even read that. Captain Bill Robertson had issued a free zone decree. Oh, that's just something I threw in. I was going through researching and I found that David Miscavige was notorious for using violence against members. That's past tense. I wonder if he's changed or it should be present tense. Anyway, couple of problems now. Now that you know that, yeah. So anyway, L. Ron Hubbard was killed. The CIA took the real OT levels. David Miscavige was sent as a puppet of the deep state to destroy Scientology. Well, I accept that David Miscavige has done a lot to destroy the Church of Scientology through his incompetence, mismanagement, rage, stupidity. But he could do that all himself. He doesn't need the deep state to be an idiot. He's a high school dropout running a multi-billion-dollar thing. He's smart enough to hire some, logs who can do lawyering and some of the heavy lifting. But let's just continue on, shall we, and answer Ashton Gray's idea of the body double. The body double. My article, this is one of my most read articles on my blog, by the way. The Church of Scientology's great big lie about the death of this thing has been read hundreds of thousands of times. People are curious about the real death of L. Ron Hubbard. And L. Ron Hubbard died January 24, 1986 at age 74, California. And I have the documents, and the chronology. Robert von Young, who was there when, I mean, he was part of the team that went up when Ron died. Because when Ron died, there was Annie, Pat and Annie, and I'm not even sure Pat was there because L. Ron Hubbard had thrown him off the ranch the year before, but Annie was there. I think Pat was there, and Stephen Pfaff, who built the meter that L. Ron Hubbard wanted to kill himself with. Yeah. Anyway, this is a really interesting video by Robert von Young. Wish I could have met him. So the clinical history we note here, long-standing history of chronic pancreatitis, recent history of dysphasia, because Ron had had stroke, so he'd had dysphasia. That is, he couldn't really read printed materials, having trouble talking. And in the highlighted portion, the sheriff coroner talked to Dr. Denk, Hubbard's personal physician. So he says, Ryder in the highlighted yellow, Ryder telephoned the residence and spoke with Dr. Denk regarding the decedent's medical history. Dr. Denk reported that he had been residing at the ranch and treating the decedent for the past 2 years. But I have to add that Dr. Denk and Miss Scavenge and others were up gambling in Reno when Hubbard died, so he wasn't there when Hubbard died in his Bluebird motorhome. He described the decedent as having displayed signs of dysphagia for about 8 days and indicated there was little doubt in his mind that the terminal event was a CVA, which is a cardiovascular aneurysm. I forget the right term. It's a stroke. Someone could maybe put that in. Who knows more than I do? Okay, let me see. Oh, Poe on the go. Glad to have you here. Hey there, Poe. Glad you showed up. I think you were on a live or something. We're going through the autopsy of L. Ron Hubbard, Poe. And he'd been drinking, and it's a surprise he lasted as long as he did. So he'd been being treated with Visceral, and the deputies noted the will had been changed. So basically what happened is David Miscavige and the crew, Earl Cooley, Hubbard's attorney, showed up. And you can read the coroner's report. I have the whole medical thing treated here. There's the LRH death event where they claimed that L. Ron Hubbard had dropped the body. He had causatively, at the death event, they claimed Ron went exterior, but on a terminal basis that he dropped the body. And Earl Cooley said he laid down in a perfectly healthy body and floated out because the body had become an impediment to research. But the problem I have here is L. Ron Hubbard audited himself every day from the time he met the e-meter and fell in love with it. The time he died, he was always So if L. Ron Hubbard, if the body had become an impediment to research and he needed to leave the body, then he couldn't audit himself, which means that when you leave the body on a permanent basis as a Scientologist, drop the body, as they so charmingly call it, you don't need an e-meter, apparently, because you can go into the between lives area without fear of getting pulled by retractor beams to the implanting stations on Mars. Okay, Poe, you're a cop. I wish you'd been here earlier. And then Earl Cooley talking, blah blah blah. But what happened is Earl Cooley went in and said to the sheriff coroner, "Hey, I'm the attorney." They had just passed a law in California where you didn't have to have an autopsy for religious reasons. And so Cooley walks in with a document, and it might even be this document. You're not going to see it, Osa. It might be this document. I might have a copy of the Cooley document. Okay, so Cooley tells the sheriff coroner, I have Hubbard's directions here. He does not want an autopsy for religious reasons. I want you to release the body to me. We're going to cremate it right now. And the sheriff coroner goes, now just wait a minute there, partner. You slick Boston lawyer, son of a bitch. This is L. Ron Hubbard we got dead here. I want to make sure there's no foul play. So I'm not going to release the body till we fingerprint him. and take blood samples. Cooley knows he's backed into a corner because I tell you, these guys, reportedly, this is anecdotal, but David Miscavige had told someone the best thing that could happen is if L. Ron Hubbard died, because L. Ron Hubbard was being investigated by the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. A whole bunch of people wanted to sue him. The FBI was looking at him. And Miscavige said the best thing would happen is if the old man died. And sure enough, the old man died. He changed his will the day before he died, post-stroke, on a psychiatric medication, Vistaril. So that gets noted by a deputy. I think there's a deputy Bang. A really cool name. Yeah, it's Deputy Gassett, and I think there's a deputy Bang in it. So I got all the police reports and stuff. So the sheriff coroner goes, "No, attorney, no, Mr. Attorney, we're not releasing the body." So Cooley knows he's got to like let them take blood samples and fingerprints. And by the way, there was a strange, like 12 hours almost, there was an interval between the time they found Ron dead and the time they called the police. And from what I understand, they got in their cars and drove as fast as they could from Reno and from Gold Base to the ranch. And they didn't know where it was. Pat Broker had to give them directions. So they noted there's a term, Paul, maybe you can help me out. You know, when a body's been lying flat for 12 hours and it's, all the blood pools in the back. Yeah, it's noted in the autopsy report, which I have here. And so what happened? So Cooley said, "Okay, take the blood and the fingerprints, because we want to throw them in the crematory really fast." Scientology has a belief that you should be cremated, or at least it used to, so that as when your Satan leaves the body, you don't put lines and beams in the body and try to keep that identity of that body. Yeah, it's lividity. Yes, lividity. Thank you. Yes, there was also rigor. Ron, by that time, was quite stiff. Somebody told me that when he died, it's really cold up there. It's really cold up in Creston, January. Central California, the coast is cold and damp. And in January it is. Someone said they cranked up the air conditioner in the Bluebird motorhome just to keep Hubbard on ice, just to keep him fresh. But the lividity, the blood cooling. But they did note that's why I think they got up there to the base and they took all the cash because Hubbard had like $1 million a week at one point in cash going up there. And that is Rolexes. And I think that's where the David Miscavige starter kit. That's where he got a starter kit. So what happened is L. Ron Hubbard, going earlier on the chain, as we say in Scientology, in 1946, thereabouts, L. Ron Hubbard had been arrested in San Luis Obispo for passing a bad check. And he had to be fingerprinted. And then also when he was, the FBI had his fingerprints as well. So they checked the fingerprints of the decedent, one L. Ron Hubbard, and they matched the arrest fingerprints. And they matched the other fingerprints the feds had. So it was, in fact, not a body double, not a doppelganger, not a plasma body or an ethereal manifestation impersonating a human or a shadow person. It was actually the real dead L. Ron Hubbard. So that's one of the problems with Ashton Gray's theory, is that we have the actual, and you go to my blog here, it's posted on the Scientology Money Project. This is the certificate of death, and you can kind of scroll through it and you can read. I don't want that. Okay. So it's pretty interesting to read Hubbard's. Let's just scroll through it while we're at it, shall we? Because Hubbard never, exteriorized. He died like everyone else. But this is the actual thing, and they noted the needle marks, 10 recent needle marks, and they did note the administration of Israel. Dr. Dunk was pretty, was had to tell the sheriff coroner what was going on. So, time of death, January 24, 1956. Time found 2,000 hours inside a motorhome described as a 1982 Bluebird motorhome, California license, one DSP 131. And a funny aside, they actually sold the Bluebird motorhome that Hubbard died in. The church sold it, and then at some point they said, "What the, what the did we just do?" And they bought it back from the owner at a substantial profit. I mean, the guy who bought, because like what, this is so crazy. You got the source and founder, the only one in 75 million years who found the way out of the trap, and he dies in a Blue motorhome, and then you sell it. They did a what the fuck did you do? Go, this is where the guy died. Go, it'd be like selling the tomb of Jesus for the money. I mean, to Scientologists. Yeah, I'm vastly overstating it by incredible magnitudes, but it's like if he's the source and incarnation, Hi Jenna P. Hey Jenna. Hey to you. Hey back. Yeah, they sold it, and then they had to send out a team to buy it back. It'd be like, what were you thinking? Okay, so clinical history, long-standing history of chronic pancreatitis, recent history of dysphagia as of on or about January 16. So he did have a second stroke then. And this is the investigation. This is really interesting to read about what actually happened. And they had the will and who showed up. And yeah, here it is. At this time, you can actually read this part. Based upon my religious belief, I object to any and all postmortem anatomical dissections or other autopsy procedures being conducted on my body. That's what Hubbard wrote, that he didn't want any postmortem anatomical dissections. Now, if he'd had a stroke, I don't think he'd have the presence of mind. So I tend to think Attorney Cooley wrote that. And the other thing I've often said, and this is a point that Robert Von Young made, and I agree with, I think the church killed L. Ron Hubbard. It was elder abuse, and Poe, jump in here, help me out if you're on. Now, L. Ron Hubbard at this point is worth about $400 million, a report of $400 million. Medical helicopters have been in use since the Korean War. So medevac helicopters are available. You have a 74-year-old male, stroke. You can pick up the phone, call UCLA, Santa Barbara, they had a hospital. The point is, you could have medevaced Hubbard out. If I had a 74-year-old relative who had a stroke, I would make sure he or she got to the hospital the quickest way possible. If I had to pay for a helicopter to transport them to UCLA, to one of the best hospitals in the area, by God, I would put them on that helicopter. It's maybe an hour by air, hour and a half. But I would call 911. I would get my relative medevaced out of there. And if it was the founder and source of my religion, I sure in Zenu's name would get him transported by helicopter. But they didn't. They let L. Ron Hubbard stroke out and die. So, and it is the real L. Ron Hubbard, and they let him die. So he didn't even get medical treatment because it was in the best interest of the church to have him drop his body. Now, something else I want to share with you. So that's so we do have, I do have on file the actual document. It's worth a read. And like I said, this is one of the most read things on my blog is how L. Ron Hubbard died. And they have the blood samples. They actually did the blood test. Traces of hydrazine detected on blood specimen. And so that's how they know that he was taking Vistaril, a psychiatric medication he's being injected with, by whom we don't know. Probably Annie, probably Dr. Dent told. So again, we go through. Oh yeah, here it is. You can read Deputy Bang and I like that name, Deputy Bang. So they showed up, and there's a whole chronology and timeline. This is good police work. Supplementary report. Uh, 4 fingerprint cards. This goes into the fingerprint cards, and it shows that a fingerprint expert compared the cards to the ones that the FBI had. FBI specialist, fingerprint specialist James Ford. He searched the FBI files for Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. And I think Hubbard gave his fingerprints to the FBI in 1952 when he was showing them how that he made people in the Dianetics Foundation give their fingerprints to the FBI during the communist hysteria to show that they were loyal Americans. And so the FBI fingerprint expert concludes that the body found in the Bluebird motorhome is in fact one L. Ron Hubbard dead guy. So show you another thing that's kind of related but off the record. Yeah, sure, in a stroke, every minute counts. Exactly, Mary. And they didn't get him to the hospital. Why, Scientology? When he had a stroke, why didn't you medevac him? He's worth 400 million. You have all the money in the world. Yes, that certainly proves money can't buy happiness. It can't. And with L. Ron Hubbard being locked in his Bluebird motorhome, medicated, changed his will, took the money away from his widow, Mary Sue, and his family, robbed them, and transferred everything to the church. So yeah, talk about it's bad. Hubbard had another way of exteriorizing that was quite charming. We're going to share about, and it's a little bit chilling, but let's just. Oh, I have to stop sharing that screen. Stop sharing that. Hold on. Brandana, I have too many windows open. My assistant. No, I want to. No, I just want to stop sharing. I want to share another screen. Now, L. Ron Hubbard did have a 100% guaranteed method of exteriorization tech. Okay. I wanted to show you this 100% guaranteed. None of the OT stuff. Okay. This is like hardcore. This will get it done. And not recommended, but Hubbard actually wrote it. And so it's there in writing. L. Ron Hubbard had a process called R245. And you can see here on Wiki, let's get R245 up. R245. A lot of you new Scientology watchers may not have heard of R245 as a permanent means of exteriorization. Where the hell is that thing? Hold on. I've got to, I get so frustrated. Oh, just bear with me. Chat amongst yourself. I had this thing all set up for you, and I'm going to exit this. Leave. And I just need to. Okay, let me get it back up. I'm going to show you. I'm sorry. I had this ready for you. I wanted to be so prompt. Such a good researcher. And okay, so okay, we'll get R245. Are we back? Okay. Okay, there it is. Now I'm going to share this screen. And this is R245. And what that means, let's go up. I'm going to make it larger for you. This is kind of eerie. R245 is Scientology slang for murder by unaliving yourself with a gun. And Hubbard described it as, quote, an enormously effective process for exteriorization, but its use is frowned upon by society at this time, unquote. So exteriorization refers to the separation of the thetan from the body. Hubbard said 2 shots to the head with a 45 would effect permanent exteriorization. He talked about it in The Creation of Human Ability, and he referred to it through his lectures. So Hubbard actually said, yeah, that's the way you permanently exteriorize. And unfortunately, tragically, more than a few Scientologists have done that. Some have jumped off a bridge, literally, like the late Steve Brackett, who was the fiance of the voice of TV's Bart Simpson. That's Nancy Cartwright, Scientologist. So, uh, yeah, that was Hubbard claimed it was a joke, but it's kind of eerie that he said that's how you would really exteriorize someone. Forget all the Scientology stuff, just two caps. Anyway, so that's the thing. That's the theory that the tech was so good that the CIA had to unalive Hubbard, make him disappear, and there's corners of the free zone. And please, if you want to do a podcast with me, talk to me about it. I'm available. I'm not controlling anything. In fact, that's the reason I did the podcast. Uh, the theory's weak, unsubstantiated. I don't think it's worth anything, and I don't think Hubbard was CIA. And I'm going to do a show on that. And but if you have the right to have your opinion on the matter, I just don't have any smoking gun evidence that he was, and I can argue why. For example, so let me just why Scientology was at war with the CIA and what they did is in their PR battle with the CIA and how they used FOIA. And so there's a lot of outpoints here. Um, some comments from Snorkeling Dragon. Oh, let's go back up. I think we're getting ahead. Um, a neighbor lent me a collection of DVDs of a gentleman that explains the entire Old Testament step by step. Okay, that's interesting. I'm glad we're having discussion. Um, Jesse said COB told him to grow up when he suggested LRH just reemerge. Yeah, I've done a couple of podcasts with Jesse Prince. Really interesting stuff. They're in my Surviving Scientology Apple. They're on iTunes, and Jesse talks about that. So, so that's the position because no one's demonstrated. L. Ron Hubbard used to have this thing in the 60s, I believe, 70s, where you had to prove your abilities. I think, and I need an old timer. You were supposed to like go read a book in a library in another country, or you were supposed to go use your psychic OT powers to contact someone in another country and prompt them to write you a letter, like control their mind. And they think, oh, you were on my mind, so I thought I would write you a letter. And none of this ever came about. And in fact, Scientology doesn't really talk about exteriorization anymore on their website. They give it a brief mention, but in the Hubbard era, and really up through maybe the 2010s to the 2015, and still even now, exteriorization is the big thing. And I don't know how many former Scientologists I've interviewed, well over 100, maybe 150 Scientologists informally, but about 90 on at least 90 to 100 on podcasts. I've done enough interviews. I've never met a Scientologist who said they went exterior. I did meet one who said that they were doing a process and suddenly they were floating on the ceiling and they could look down on their body. What we would call an out of body experience. But for all the OTs I've interviewed, none of them, just the one pre-clear, hadn't reached a state of clear and had that kind of experience. So some of Scientology's processes are psycho. Um, they're very potent, coercive, very aggressive, psychologically harmful, and they can induce states of mind that have been widely discussed that are not good states of mind. They want to reduce you to a subservient state where you acquiesce, or they want to radicalize you, or all the above. So you're basically an obedient soldier. Um, I hope that answers it, but I just wanted to talk about that was the conspiracy, and now you've seen the books you can read. If you wanna really do some research, um, boy, this is interesting. I wish I'd followed the comments better. And she said, exact quote, "You're a demon, come to steal my son and stick your claws in his to drag him to hell." Wow. The big flood story has been going around for ages like an urban myth. Apparently, there were 3 big flood events. Well, we're just gonna have to have a thing on, you know, the Anunnaki and other stuff. Uh, mock up the moon, mock up the fake moon, which is ask our man in Hippo, Los Angeles. I don't even know. I'm kinda late on the chain, so to speak, on that one. Uh, do your loved ones call you because you are thinking of them? Or are you thinking about them because they're going to call? Or is it random? I've had, people I've called because I felt like calling them. I said, "Oh, I was thinking about you." I don't rule out those kinds of, spiritual relations. Um, that's a good reason to research the Bible. Um, this is a nice conversation. So anyway, there you go. Watergate was a cover for the government to steal the OT levels. I reject that whole entire line of thinking. I actually read quite a bit about Watergate because it deeply affected me in high school, and I, read up on it, and and concluded it was a straightforward burglary. The president lied. Nixon got down to a point where he knew he would be impeached. He would go and have his trial, and then he would articles of impeachment would be voted on it. He would be impeached because he broke the law, and so he resigned from the presidency. That was so unrelated to L. Ron Hubbard, who at the time of Watergate was creating Operation Snow White and other things in Queens, New York, while eating fish sticks and French fries that were cooked off a cookie sheet and taking his vitamins and reading pulp novels. So there you go. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Glad I could speak to that. And like I said, Ron's org people, Ashton Gray, you want to come on and talk about it? Sure. Just send me an email, and we can talk about it, and be glad to talk about anything you want. So hit me up. Now I also reserve the right, though, if you want to talk about things that are they're completely for which there's no evidence, for which there's no evidence. I'm not going to like do a show where you speculate about things, because I want actual legitimate documented things that would make for a quality podcast, and not something that's purely conjecture in which you don't have credible evidence, because I want quality evidence on the show. Their standard is high. You have to meet the standard of proving your case. And that's one reason uh, I've declined to do certain podcasts, because I just don't want to talk bullshit, and or talk about fake moon landings, or things like that. I don't go there. So, but if you have a credible case, I would certainly entertain having you on. Um, I would love to see you do a segment on the Nephilim and the Watchers. It's crazy stuff about alien comes to Earth. I, that that that's something like, it's a little bit outside my lane. I can talk about it. I mean, I've read all the literature on it, but that's why I said I want to open up another channel called Psychic Architecture. That's the name I'm working with, and I want to talk about things where I want to go outside of Scientology, because I'm finding an audience that's interested in. But there's still some interesting stuff in Scientology. But uh, I want to launch out. That is an interesting space, and it's been covered, and we could do some interesting things on it. But I'll think about it. But I don't know that I'm up for it. Uh, Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So, okay. Well, thank you, Sweet Liberty, German Wars, and Stitch, Stitching on the dock of the bay. I see what you're doing. So, well, I'm out of here. SP Ken for SPTV, and glad to have you. Glad to have you here. Hope you enjoyed the show. As always, give me a like and a subscribe. I have to have that to keep the deep state happy.